superliner United States as our camera picks her up out of New York on her historic maiden crossing of the Atlantic. You're welcome aboard while we make these photographs which point up the luxury and comfort of the $73 million, 53,000-ton floating city. The churning wake as she moves cleanly through the water, a ship racing smoothly at full speed. Aboard the First Lady of the Seas is the daughter of the President. The ship's skipper, Commodore Manning, invites Miss Margaret Truman up to the bridge. Then, past 6 in the morning, they share an historic moment. The United States breaks the transatlantic record. Jubilant passengers stayed awake all night to witness the finish at Bishop Rock on the southwest coast of England. Next, the first docking at Le Havre, France. The unparalleled time of the crossing was 3 days, 10 hours, 40 minutes, beating the Queen Mary's time by 10 hours and 2 minutes. A sailor's welcome for the Blue Ribbon winner, a ship that averaged 36 knots on the 2,942-mile crossing, or about 41 land miles an hour. Now on to Southampton, England for the next stop. And here begins a greeting true to the tradition of a great seafaring nation. Sure, the United States beat the best time of a British liner, but there's matchless sporting blood in a nation that loves ships. Generous tribute is paid to the American craft and craftsmanship. Americans aboard the ship are astonished, overwhelmed by the reception, its warmth and sincerity. Britain's unforgettable salute to the liner United States.
The starboard side of the bridge deck house was the log room, which held the critical record-keeping information for the ship's crossings. But as with many spaces on United States, the inclusion of a dedicated room for the ship's logs was rather unusual. United States was designed with safety first and foremost in mind. Both the company's CEO, John Franklin, and its director, Vincent Astor, had direct personal ties to the Titanic disaster. Many of the key safety features were controlled in the room behind this bulkhead. the damage control room, which featured controls for fire alarms, smoke detection, watertight doors, and fire doors. United States was designed with safety first and foremost in mind. Both the company's CEO, John Franklin, and its director, Vincent Astor, had direct personal ties to the Titanic disaster. Many of the key safety features were controlled in the room behind this bulkhead, the damage control room, which featured controls for fire alarms. The DF loop was a crucial bit of navigation kit. It helped lock onto shore-based radio signals in any direction, which could help triangulate a detailed position on the map. It was especially useful alongside radar off the notoriously foggy US East Coast on approach to New York City. The flagboard was used to house the ship's various flags to be run up the halyards attached to the antenna mast. Anything from the house flag showing the colours of the United States lines to signal flags conveying United States intentions. United States was fitted with searchlights on either side of the bridge, really only for use in special circumstances, like if she was enveloped in fog, but they could also be used to flash Morse signals to distant ships. Behind this bulkhead was one of the ship's many fans, which drew in fresh air constantly to circulate throughout the ship. The captain's cabin was huge. It was behind this bulkhead and was about the same size as the executive officer's stateroom and office combined. Like the other senior officers, he got his own bathroom, although naturally his was the biggest of all. Perks of the job, I guess. The officers' promenade here wrapped around the forward superstructure. Behind this bulkhead was the captain's reception room, a grand sitting room where he could do much of his business, conferring with crew members or even valued guests and reporters. The ship's executive officer had a role so important, he too was given his own office. It was right here, conveniently near both the bridge and the skipper's quarters. These portholes provided light to all the senior officers' cabins, like the first, second and third officers. Further aft, inside, was a comfortable lounge for the senior crewmen to enjoy while they were off duty. Two small emergency boats sat on quick-acting davits either side of the forward deckhouse. These could get a swift boat over the side at high speed in the case of any kind of man-overboard situation. United States provided room for its passengers' furry companions as well. Here were the extensive dog kennels, which included a dog run for exercise, the actual kennels themselves, and berthing on the starboard side for a dedicated kennel attendant. This section of deckhouse held engine room exhaust passages and more electric fans which supplied fresh air and draft where it was needed far below. Nestled into the deckhouse here are two bathrooms, or heads, both port and starboard for tourist class passengers who might be relaxing on deck and enjoying the sunshine, but need a short break. Behind this bulkhead is a fan room, one of many. These rooms contain powerful electric fans and units which circulated fresh air throughout the ship into the boiler rooms. These doors led down to one of the main tourist class stairways and gave tourist class passengers their own private promenade beneath the first funnel. Nestled into the deckhouse here are two bathrooms, or heads, both port and starboard for tourist class passengers who might be relaxing on deck and enjoying the sunshine, but need a short break. This door led down to the aft first-class staircase, but just off to its right was nestled the ship's officers' mess and pantry where they could take meals. 4 first-class cabins were installed here, providing some of the most unique views aboard the ship. Behind here was another fan room, but just inboard of that was the first-class children's playroom, where kids could spend their time playing with toys, colouring, and doing crafts. Windbreaks like this were crucial for passenger comfort. The United States was moving ahead at great speed, around 30 knots, which could send breezes ripping down the deck like a wind tunnel. These breaks would interrupt the flow and divert it away, meaning passengers behind could relax without feeling like they were sitting in a hurricane. In here were bathrooms for both men and women in case anybody needed a quick break in between their relaxing on deck. The rear aspect of the deckhouse right here contained exhaust vent trunking, which evacuated stale air from the engine rooms and the galleys so it could be replaced with fresh air from the fan rooms instead. The aft games deck here provided yet more space for passengers to play quoits, deck tennis, or simply unwind in the sun with a book on one of the ship's bright red deck chairs. twin sets of stairs provided access to first-class accommodations at the aft end of the deckhouse, with easy access to cabins S103 through S116. Behind this bulkhead was the upper section of the theatre, which spanned 2 decks from the promenade deck below. These twin sets of stairs provided access to first-class accommodations at the aft end of the deckhouse, with easy access to cabins S103 through S116. This doorway led to the cabin-class staircase that descended down to their lounge below. Hatch number 3. This one was used mainly for baggage. On boarding, passengers could label bags as unwanted. These would then be loaded into the ship's hold through this hatch, while any bags that were actually wanted were sent instead to the passenger's cabin. Behind this bulkhead was an electrical workshop where repairs and servicing for most of the ship's electrical systems could be performed even mid-ocean. Behind this bulkhead was another fan room, which supplied fresh air for the decks below. Much of SS United States' interior was air-conditioned, a modern comfort that passengers and crew would have come to very much appreciate on summer crossings. The cargo hatch here was used for handling mail. The SS United States held a vaunted US mail contract and carried tons of the stuff on every voyage. The deck around you here is a sports deck for cabin class passengers, but it's also the raised roof over the cabin class lounge below, a clever double use of the space. The docking bridge complex featured this aft steering system, which had all the necessary equipment to handle the ship, either as a backup or as a simple alternative for manoeuvring in unusual situations. Most of the time, the telegraphs at the wheel back here were sat wrapped under canvas to protect them from the elements. The docking bridge wings were reserved for the use of crew only and gave a fine view down the ship's side. Backing out of the dock at New York and into the Hudson was a delicate manoeuvre, and crew on duty needed to be extra vigilant to make sure the ship cleared all obstacles on the way out. The ship's fantail, the very stern, mounted a jackstaff, which proudly flew the US merchant ensign flag. Meanwhile, the deck around it could be used by cabin-class passengers for games or relaxing in the fresh air. This small covered promenade gave some shelter from the elements, while directly behind this bulkhead was the small stage that sat at the back of the cabin-class lounge. The cabin-class lounge was a plush space that was beautifully decorated with a mural called the Mississippi, Father of Waters by Hildreth Mier, showing the river sprouting like a tree through the middle of mainland USA, while the walls around it were clad in pink-beige aluminium leaf. Behind here was the cabin-class library and writing room, a small but comfortable space for those that wanted a quiet escape. These doors led into the aft cabin-class foyer, where passengers could access the lounge, their staterooms, or the stairs that led to the decks above and below. The ship's main theatre was accessible to both first and cabin class passengers. Behind this bulkhead was the stage. SS United States main theatre, behind this bulkhead, served a few different purposes, from staging plays and talent shows to screening films and even hosting Sunday Mass. The ship's first-class smoking room was a large space where passengers could get refreshments. The service bar behind this bulkhead provided drinks and snacks. The big double doors here gave access to the foyer and the aft first-class staircase, where passengers could access all the major public areas from the observation lounge towards the bow, all the way back to the smoking room and theatre towards the stern. Known simply as the special restaurant or the first-class grill, the tiny eatery behind this bulkhead was an extremely popular, reservations-only space that could only seat 50 at a time. This was where all celebrities came to dine, away from the riffraff, and surrounded by gorgeous cut crystal light panels designed by Charles Lynn Tissot. The ballroom was a central hub for passengers by day and by night. It was directly behind this bulkhead. It led directly off from the main foyer, and the ballroom featured plush red chairs and sofas, carved glass panels on the walls, showing undersea themes like coral, and a bandstand for nightly performances by the likes of the Myers Davis Orchestra. Behind this bulkhead was berthing and accommodations for all the engineers that kept the ship running. In fact, this section was reserved for the chief engineer and the executive engineer's cabins. The chief got his own reception room as well. These doors led into the first-class berthing and main staircase, which led down to the main foyer. The staterooms behind here featured their own bathrooms and showers, and although they were certainly comfortable, the most vaunted suites were well below on the upper deck, including the legendary rooms U91 and 89, which were known collectively as the Duck Suite, thanks to their bird-centric decor. This door led into the forward first-class berthing on the sun deck, which featured some very fine cabins. This entire section of the forecastle deck was used as an open promenade for tourist-class passengers. They could emerge from the doors here that led directly to the middle of 3 tourist-class staircases, but on big sea days or when the wind was up, the doors would be shut and the deck closed to passengers, probably more often than not. The number 2 hatch here was used for loading general cargo, baggage, and the ship's stores. The shaft of the cargo hatch led down to the holds about 8 stories beneath your feet. The small deckhouse here contained a fan room on either side, so fresh air could be sucked in and sent down to the crew and tourist class accommodations below. The cargo holds had to be ventilated too. Stagnant air in an enclosed space is extremely hazardous and can even prove fatal. This doorway led to a staircase for tourist class passengers berthed in the forward end of the ship beneath your feet. But like the other door, the number 1 cargo hatch led down to the biggest hold in the ship and was used mainly for general cargo. Down in the number 1 cargo hold was space for storing automobiles, something a car-centric post-war American society would have deeply valued, although getting your car across the Atlantic certainly can't have been cheap. This door led to a crew stairwell that gave them access to the promenade deck forward of the breakwater. A small space, but still one where they could come for some fresh air or a smoke. The trunking and vents on top of the deck houses at the bow here helped feed fresh air into the tourist class and crew spaces below. Keeping it off the decks protected them from seawater, and it meant more space for passengers and crew to stretch their legs. The trunking and vents on top of the deck houses at the bow here helped feed fresh air into the tourist class and crew spaces below. Keeping it off the decks protected them from seawater, and it meant more space for passengers and crew to stretch their legs. The forward aspect of the crew deckhouse here had a clever double purpose. Although it held a fan room and other crew spaces, it also mounted. The capstans here were used when docking and mooring the ship, but like many liners of the era, most of the heavy anchor handling equipment was hidden away on the deck below. In fact, the huge windlass, anchor chains, and other heavy pieces of equipment got their own special mooring room directly beneath where you're standing. The crew open promenade was used mainly by sailors and stewards who were berthed in the bow, but when the weather was bad, the deck would have been unusable and even dangerous. Bridge wings were crucial for docking and departure because they provided a fine, unobstructed view down the length of the ship's hull. United States bridge wings also have a polaris each, the kind of simplified compass used for maintaining bearing.